So good morning, and to some of you, good afternoon. My name is Bill Coakley from BSMA. Wanted to welcome you to this webinar and just go over a few housekeeping pieces of information. First, the chat box has been disabled, so no need to use that feature. But the questions have been, time for questions has been put aside towards the end. So anybody who has a question, down the bottom of your box, you should see a Q&A feature. Feel free to use that to type in your questions, and Kat will find your questions and direct them to the appropriate panelists in order to address them. Also, this event is being recorded. Anybody who registered for it will receive the information, probably by this time next week. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Kat. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Bill. Appreciate it. So welcome again, everyone. I'm Kat Hall. I am the head of GXP Quality Assurance at a company called Ignite, and I'm co-chair of the Clinical Supply Steering Committee here at BSMA, along with Bill. So today I'm really excited to have some key guest panelists here with me today, and we'll get to introductions with them in a second. We're setting the stage to really start discussing the evolution of technology, and today in particular focusing on one often underestimated but overly used piece of technology in our world and of clinical trials, and that is IRT or RTSM or IVR if you're still using that old term. We always like to say in this realm, rose by any other name, because there's a lot of them. But we're going to spend, some time really talking about where the technology is evolving to, what are some of the future directions, and some of the ongoing challenges. So with that said, I'll get us introduced, and maybe I can ask each of the panelists to, in addition to telling us who you are, maybe give like a few minutes of like your perspective on, what is like your primary, thoughts when it comes to this technology space and where it's going. So let's start off with Jeff.
All right, leading off here. Thank you, Kat. Appreciate that. My name's Jeff Rubison. I'm the Vice President of Product Strategy here at Endpoint Clinical. So I'm in charge of our commercial products and working with our customers to deliver on our technology. Just keeping it brief, right? When it comes to technology in general, it's been an exciting, last 2 years, let alone last decade, with the evolution that we've seen, not just within this space, but within technology as a whole. So, I've been in the RTSM industry for about 20 years, and there's definitely been challenges and opportunities along the way. But ultimately, from a technology perspective, what we're really finding that excites us, obviously, is a lot around data and AI when it comes to even the last year and a half of different innovation that we've seen, not just from RTSM providers, but from large technology companies as a whole. So a lot of work on our product roadmap surrounding how we can use AI right now within different opportunities for our company, whether it's internal, business process automation, whether it's external user experience, or whether it's AI with our data. There's a lot of exciting opportunity to really optimize, some of these traditional workflows. So that's really what I'm excited about, and we'll probably touch on that as we continue to go through this agenda here.
Definitely,
Okay.
definitely.
And I'll take over from you, Jeff. Thank you for your introduction. I'm Henk Dieteren, the Clinical Supply Chain Solutions Consultant for Zavoda. I'm now working for Zavoda since 5 years. And before, I was a customer of Zavoda, working in the industry, co-heading CTS departments at several pharma companies. And before that, I was even working in ClinOps, being a study manager. I started my life in ClinOps back in the early 90s. My role at Zavoda is being the voice of the customer, helping customers understand the language of IRT, which is very often very complex for especially people that are very naive to IRT. They think in their own processes. They have no clue what it means to translate that process into IRT functionality. The other way is also true, that I help our teams to understand what the customer means with what they want. So very exciting job. I'm very happy that I can work for Zavoda in this way. What I think is especially developing in IRT is, well, we all know that it started with the phone, and we all know that where we are now is not the end of development of IoT. What I think is that we will have more and more AI functionality and support in the supply chain logistics. Also meaning how we can best fit IoT in the needs of a customer, in the needs of their process, and also talking to each other with different systems. That's something that where I think AI will have a big say in the future. Not yet now, Brian. Sorry for that, but it's. I think we are in a good way, but I think we will discuss this how we can proceed and how the thoughts are today looking to the future, because the future starts today.
Yep. Brian.
Yep. Hank, you are correct to talk about AI and then look my way. My name is Brian Clayton. I'm the founder and CEO of BC Consulting. And I am happy to say I am an AI first guy these days. Pretty much everything I do all day, every day involves AI. I've been in this space now since about 2010, so 15-ish years. Over that time, I've worked at 3 different IRT providers, that then being Senduit, which I guess now is Quintiles, Y Prime, and Endpoint. And these days, I do all kinds of things in the consulting world for IRT, working for many different sponsors, lots of different providers out there as well. I do believe, and I think most people on this call would agree, that IRT is a narrowly defined technology and should be. And by that, the idea that IRT should randomize patients and manage clinical trial supply. And beyond that, we need to have some serious conversations about whether we're over-engineering systems. I certainly have found myself in my career in some of those Franken-system situations where maybe we've over-engineered some things. And I've learned my lesson. Now, all that said, technology is doing some pretty incredible things these days. So kind of how that role maybe changes in the future is something that I'm very interested to continue talking about. And the way that we use AI is, I think, something that we have to be very deliberate about with things like regulatory frameworks and putting in place AI governance models as well. So that's the type of thing that I really enjoy talking about, and I think we're going to talk a little bit more about today. So Imran, I think you're last, huh? Save the best for last.
Thanks, Brian. Yeah, hi folks. Imran Shakur. I have the pleasure of leading the RTSM team at Alexion, which is part of AstraZeneca. We're the rare disease unit for AstraZeneca. In my role as I kind of have two roles actually. One is to lead the RTSM team, and the other is to serve as our technology lead for all things that fit under our clinical supply organization. Yeah, really happy to be here. I was, as everyone was talking about AI, I was kind of thinking, how do I not say AI? And I think I've already broken that by saying it twice. So AI is definitely important. It is definitely going to hit us at some point. But I think before getting into that, there is a lot that we have to do within the RTSM community of just leveraging just the data that we have, right? So even outside of the AI discussion, there's so much data that we don't we don't use effectively enough. And that's really what I'm interested in seeing. And certainly AI will have a role in playing that. But I think even before it does, there's a tremendous opportunity of really leveraging that data and making it work for us, rather than us trying to, search for it through, drilling through reports and things like that. But that's my gist there.
Awesome. Well, thank you all. And I will remind everyone in the audience, go ahead and pop any questions that you have in the Q&A. I'll keep my eye on that. But gentlemen, my first question on the table, and Brian, you already kind of alluded to this because I think this is going to be a little bit of a fun debate. So IRT RTSM, should we go back to basics and just do exactly what RTSM means and randomize a patient, dispense the supplies? Or as we know, as clinical trials have become more and more complex, IRT RTSM studies systems have been asked to do more and more to manage that complexity. Certainly, if you get into a master protocol, it's doing a lot of things to determine if a patient should go into one trial or another trial, or there needs to be adjudication between the two. And we've seen platforms expand into just being more than RTSM, but more integrated networks. So I'm going to start with you, Imran, from a sponsor perspective. Are you looking for technologies that exist to continue to do more and to expand, or to just do what they're good at? Or maybe, do we need these systems at all?
Well, selfishly, I would say yes, we do need these systems because I would like to be employed for as long as possible. But yeah, this is a great leading question, and I have always come from the mindset of being sort of built for purpose, right? Fit for purpose and things like that, right? The moment you start to introduce other capabilities that I would deem as non-traditional in the RTSM, collecting additional data points, you always run the risk of building your sort of mini EDC system, right? And that's where I have a lot of concerns, probably a lot of trauma from past lives of, how to reconcile that between the other systems, between your source data, and just the overall expectation of accountability, like in terms of like what is the accountability of the sites, right? In terms of, for example, following the visit schedule, making sure that the participants are dosed properly. I don't want that. It's very easy and convenient to say RTSM can solve all of that. But I think it's also very short-sighted as well, too, because there can be a lot of problems. So I am very much from the school of thought that, we should use, and this is why when we talk about IRT versus RTSM, why I prefer the RTSM nomenclature, because it gets, to the point and to the heart of what it's supposed to do.
I can only agree with you, Imran. RTSM should be the specialist in the supply and the randomization logistics. I worked in the pharma industry, as I already said, and working in CTS, you start much earlier than, for example, an ECRF, because that's only once a patient is enrolled, then the ECRF starts collecting data. With the RTSM or the IRT, whatever you prefer, you need to start already when a depot is being set up and your first shipment needs to go to a site. But also after patient has been completed the trial, the ECRF will be closed for that specific patient. But as CTS guys, you need to continue with the next steps in the supply chain, meaning up to destruction. So you really need to have a standalone IRT specialized in the logistics and the supply logistics, of course, also in the randomization, because I also think the complexity in algorithms is something that requires specialists. And therefore, I think it's really crucial to have a standalone specific system for supply chain, for CTS. And of course, looking to what could it be, looking to the future, I think there, but that's also what we maybe will discuss also with integrations and all those things. I think from the future, you also see this in the regulations. The patient journey, the patient engagement seems to be more and more important for the regulators as well. So we need to somehow find a way out how to support the patient journey as part of the complete supply, a clinical supply, in a way that we find systems that can support that. At least this is what I think.
So that's a great point. And Jeff, I'm going to take us back in time to a lovely conversation we had with the MHRA, and they certainly made a big point that these types of systems do function as ECRFs and more real time in terms of data versus
Yeah.
EDC, which is traditionally old data. And as we move into more data analytics frameworks and data warehouses, how is that something that we should just embrace with IRT, that we are potentially ECRFs?
Yeah, Kat, I think I recall that conversation. That was a fun one. When it comes to, the expansion of RTSM, right? I mean, I kind of look at two things, right? One, we do have that real-time logistical data and, real-time transactional data, which is super helpful and gives you a lot of opportunity as a sponsor or a vendor to use that information in different downstream workflows or additional capabilities within the RTSM. What we're seeing here at Endpoint is it really, we're always trying to service our customer, right? So we leave a lot of functionality up to the customer to help us kind of guide our product direction. And, depending on the size of the sponsor and the nature of the organization, we're finding people are trying to do a lot of different things with the RTSM, right? If you have a small biotech who might not want to pay or afford large scale clinical systems, they might try to put a little bit more in the RTSM than desired. If you're like Imran at a company where you can have niche integrated solutions for every single, point of that patient and inventory journey, then, the RTSM might just be the RTSM. So, I think the key here is being flexible. And I think this will go into our conversations that I'm sure Brian will lead surrounding some headless architecture and integration. But, how do you be flexible? How do you be customer centric? But how do you provide opportunities to be both, a very single kind of guided solution with also opportunities to expand?
That's awesome. Brian, you want to round it out? You started it.
You're muted. Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
I think, oftentimes people look at me and I'm the heretic of the group for some reason,
No.
because, I've got this concept of headless IRT that I've been trying to push for like a decade now. But that doesn't mean that I don't value IRT. So for me, the function of what we do, randomization, trial, supply management, the function, I mean, it'll never go away. We always need it. It'll be here forever. It's just the way in which we interact with it, I guess, is the question that I'm continuing to raise is, does it need to be a standalone system, a standalone platform, or does it need to be a standalone function? And maybe it's a larger conversation than this introductory question here, Kat. But in my opinion, we can accomplish all of the things that the platform does as a function. And that doesn't mean that any of the companies go away. All of the providers out there still have to provide. All of the folks at pharma companies still need to oversee. Just kind of how we get to it and how we access it, I think maybe changes a little bit.
Yeah. That's what we really see at Zavoda, the benefits of the platform. If you make the IRT the gatekeeper for other products that also work from that similar single layer platform, let's say we have an ECOA where the threshold needs to be 5 to continue with the trial for the patient, and this threshold is not met, then I think an additional value of platform functionality. That's, I think, what I meant with a standalone IRT, a standalone functionality. Then the IRT can really say, hey, wait a minute, you haven't met the threshold. Check what happened, and then I can assign the medication to the patient. That's something where we will work more and more in the future, platform basis, where I'm happy that you mentioned functionalities, because that will be the case in the future. Huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you for all of that. And I think I heard each one of you kind of touch on a topic that I want to take us to next, and that is around integrations. So, you know, if IRT is a standalone, it's part of a bigger network, we know that it's part of a very large digital ecosystem these days. And it used to be back in the day, maybe you had one integration, but it was almost always from IRT out. Now we're seeing it's IRT out, wait for a signal, change something based on this, send it to this other system. So, you know, being part of this wider ecosystem is becoming complicated, as well as our trials. So, you know, can you kind of talk about some of the considerations of whether or not a customer should think an interoperable system, or how would they approach to making a wider network feel interoperable? Who wants to get us started?
If you don't mind, I can start with that, Kat. The biggest thing that I've tried to tell people, and again, this comes from, you know, over my career, making a lot of mistakes. And I think that's probably the best way we learn. The biggest thing I can tell people is, if you go back to the concept of separation of concerns, which is a software development concept, we've got to design our system really good at randomizing. So I would caution people about the idea of over integration. And I would also caution people against the idea that you're taking the medical professional's ability to make a decision, a medical decision, out of their hands. So I think, Hank, you made a great analogy about it. Maybe let's say we have a threshold in ECOA, but what we don't want to do is go to the point where the IRT system is preventing the clinical staff from administering a drug, because they're the ones who
Absolutely.
have to execute the protocol. Our system
Yeah.
should only help support them
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
doing
Yeah.
so. So our integrations have to get them to the point where they can make medical decisions on their own and support them in doing so.
Yeah.
And once we get past that and we start to control the protocol with the technology, in the integration itself, I think becomes a little bit overstepping.
Yeah, and also I think what is also crucial with respect to integrations, it's always when you set up an IRT system, make a differentiation between the nice to have and the must have, meaning also integration, which key data are really needed in which system. Because the more data you want to transfer, the more complex you make the transfer from system A to system B. And I think also within the sponsors, the discussion around how can we let talk different system with each other. Maybe there is a little bit room of improvement in those discussions, to really identify what are the real key data, but also the knowledge about the different systems. You have systems that can only push, you can have systems that can only pull. That's fine, nice when you want to have them talk to each other. But if you have a system that can push next to a system that can also alone push, you have a problem. So also the knowledge, I would almost say the knowledge gaps at the sponsor and the biotech companies, about what are the consequences, what are the requirements of integration, they're very often not really known.
Yeah.
I don't know
Okay.
whether
Yeah,
you see
I was
this,
gonna
Imran.
tee you up, Imran.
Yeah. I think that's a great transition, because into a very practical concern that stems out of a question of I guess administration and oversight, right? So, you know, consider like Alexion RTSM ownership is within the clinical supply organization, and then you have all these other systems that we integrate with that are owned by other functions, whether it's data management, clinical operations, IT, right? The list goes on. Now, what happens practically is everyone is sort of working, in their own silo, saying, "Look, we need this data, and this is the way that we know we can get it. We can just ask the RTSM to say, hey, send us this data." So there often lacks like this holistic approach of asking questions about, okay, defining critical data. Where does this need to live? It's a very practical challenge that I think a lot of people, especially and probably even more so when you're part of a larger pharma or even mid-sized biotech company, right, where that becomes a huge issue, and everyone is asking for a little bit of your data, and you're just often wondering, like, wait a second, can't we be a little bit more thoughtful about our approach?
Yeah, so I
I know.
think, piggybacking on that, Imran, I think you touched a little bit on data governance and oversight. And, the good news about integrations is that it's much easier these days than it was in the past, right? I mean, you have these, massive standards when it comes to technology standards with cloud events, API standards, all kinds of data standards with, GS1 and CDIS. So the actual process of integrating is getting a little bit easier. But when you talk about the actual fact that there's hundreds of clinical systems in our industry, and those are hundreds of different vendor companies too, right? So this is a real life issue we actually dealt with a few months ago from a support call I got pulled into, and so we had a e-source system in a headless architecture, basically trying to randomize off our system. So we had a site user using their system. Their support team got a no inventory message from us. Their support team called us. We had to wind up calling a sponsor because their SAP4 drug release wasn't complete in their system. So they didn't even have inventory that got transmitted down to us to send to the site. So now, us as an RTSM vendor being at that junction between trial supply and patient management, we're taking phone calls from 3 different organizations and dealing with the sponsor and the monitor, trying to basically just get a patient dosed. So, while the technology is definitely simple, I think making sure that you have good, channels, partnerships, relationships with all these different companies is super important as well when you get into these types of situations.
Yeah. And it's also important to really talk to your stakeholders, huh? And to really make them aware why it is important that they need to take part in the discussion around integration requirements, because they want their data in good quality. If they don't take part in those discussions, how can we as RTSM vendor, as a VODA, make it happen if people are not clear enough in their requirements?
Yeah, well, Kat, just add on one final point here. I think we oftentimes get confused between the terms data transfer and data integration.
Yeah.
And we've got to be super careful about that. To me, the idea of
Absolutely.
transferring data in or out, ugh, and the data itself is a very different conversation than the integration of systems. And
Yeah.
I won't dive into that too deeply today, but I think that's something.
Yeah, it's a great point. So I was also struck, we've mentioned it a couple times now, headless architecture. We probably have some people on the call that have no idea what we're talking about. So Brian, as one of the big proponents of this, why don't you take us through what is headless architecture, and some of the challenges or key success benefits of that. Brian, are you frozen? I think. Oh, there he is.
Oh, there we go. I'm back. My internet went a little wonky there for a second.
So can you explain what headless architecture is for everyone and some of the
You
key
got it.
challenges?
Yeah. Um, Headless architecture simply is the idea that the functionality exists without the user interface per se. Think of it from the perspective of when you buy something online, you can choose to use PayPal, choose to use your
Keep losing Brian.
Yeah.
All right.
credit
Well,
card and go back to the first website. The headless architecture idea just allows you to take functionality and consume it without having to log into a specific platform. That's kind of like a way to say it. Does that make sense the way I'm saying that? Or Jeff, was there a better way that you've explained this in the past?
Yes, I think you broke up a little bit there, but I mean, basically it's kind of RTSM as a service, right? If you're familiar with different, cloud providers or technology approaches, right? Ultimately, you can use different parts of, the RTSM and basically call different APIs and get data and perform processes. So I think Brian's PayPal example, was a good one if anybody caught that as he was breaking up. Brian, you got to go to FiOS, man. I'm telling you.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on here. Sorry about the internet.
it's all good. So, Imran, it may take us into the next topic area. When you're working with sites, we know that one of the biggest complaints from sites is so many different technologies, so many different passwords. How can you make technology easier for us? When you are approaching designing, clinical ecosystems where our TSM fits, what are some of the discussions that you're hearing from ClinOps in terms of, do we work more towards something that has a seamless interface regardless of the back end?
Yeah, I think that is the wish, right? That is the desire. It's been the desire for some time, and I think we've seen a lot of different, sort of ways of getting to that, right? And like whether it's like a given, like one particular vendor saying, "Hey, you can access like our entire platform, through this, portal," or whether it's been, other things from industry organizations like Transcelerate, et cetera. So it has, yeah, it's been a long-standing wish for very good reasons. And I think we've just not seen I haven't seen, I should say, like one really good solution to kind of fix it all. I do think that, there has been interesting discussion about, maybe starting with a simple ID, right? Like sort of like your Apple ID or your Google equivalent, right? Where you can use those IDs to log into a lot of different services, right? So I've seen that over the past few years become more and more of a discussion and more of a feature that some, providers are offering. And I think that's a good step towards trying to make this login process a little bit more streamlined. Now, it's not going to solve everything, and I don't think we'll get there. But I do think that the vision of even the headless architecture, is a good vision to aspire towards. I do think that long-term AI is going to help us with that. As we build more sophisticated internally, not LLMs, but small language models, right, that are built on really well-trained, well-defined sources of data that we can leverage across different platforms. I think that will eventually then create a ramp that gets us to that headless architecture where it almost doesn't matter like what you're interacting with, right? You can log into like something as simple as a prompt, right? Similar to what you do with ChatGPT today, ask a question, can we build that into some type of streamlined system that can work across multiple different systems? I think eventually yes. Taking these small steps, like having an ID that you can use across multiple systems, is a good kind of first step of getting there. But yeah, it is a massive pain point, and it's something that we should continue to try and get together as a community and figure out how are we going to fix this.
It's a great point, and maybe I'm going to throw out a curveball. In terms of AI in particular, and this need to simplify logins and integrations, what are some of the considerations that you guys might be hearing or considering? Maybe I'll direct this at Jeff, in terms of, developing your platforms to take cybersecurity and identity confirmation into consideration.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I mean, first off, I love that last comment, Imran. I have a lot of fun where we could go with that conversation around a headless architecture and using AI. Brian, I'm sure can get into the concept of MCP servers a little bit later, but
Just about to say that. Yeah.
at the end of the day, right? I mean, you have to be aware of cybersecurity. There's a lot of tools and technology out there if you build your technology right that handle a lot of this for you, which is nice. For example, our identity platform is basically hosted by Okta, so you get a lot of benefits when it comes to integration, interoperability, and security. You don't want to build. Believe me, I've done this in the past. You don't want to build authentication and authorization yourself, right? Use a lot of the tools and the technologies provided by Microsofts of the world, AWS or Oktas, to ultimately not just ensure cybersecurity, but also help when it comes to being able to integrate across these different, identity providers, right? I would love for the ability to enable, Google authentication in my platform. That's not a technical problem. That's more of a regulatory consideration. But I mean, honestly, it's like as we continue to evolve, that's definitely an opportunity which would help, right? So I think as we continue to move on as an industry and kind of compare regulations versus technology, which is
Yeah.
a fine balance, there's definitely a lot of opportunity.
Yeah. And also to take the regulators by the hand, because technology is available. Huh? But given the highly regulated world we are working in, we need to take the regulators by the hand that they trust what we develop. And that's, I think, what we very often see, that also for regulators, EMA recently launched the Annex 22, focusing on AI. But AI is already longer in operation. So they are always behind. And I think if we want to really get the regulators supporting us, we need to much more talk to them about our ideas, to have regulations that also help us instead of limiting us.
So I think that takes us squarely into Brian's favorite topic, AI. And I'm going to start off with you again, Imran. From a sponsor perspective, there's a lot of push in the industry to think about use cases for AI. Certainly having been in charge of data before, I think a big problem in our industry is that our data is not clean enough necessarily in order to really maximize the use. But maybe you can start off by saying, what do you foresee in terms of AI and IRT systems, and what is your company kind of driving you to think about as you head up RTSM?
Yeah. So yeah, AI is of tremendous focus within Alexion, and more broadly AstraZeneca as well. You can't go to a town hall without hearing a senior leader, all the way to our CEO, mention the importance of it. Probably like a lot of companies, whether you're on the sponsor or vendor side, we're going through mandatory AI upskilling, right? Where you have to reach certain levels of, that kind of, education on AI. So it's important. I will say that what's probably lacking is a really robust and clear like AI strategy, right? Like, okay, where are we going to be and what are we going to do? And I do think that in some ways it's also because a lot of people may not know exactly what to do with it, but they know that it's going to be an important tool. And so even within our group, the general organization that I belong to, we see a lot of proof of concepts that are taking place with AI, and that's across the organization. We're kind of in pilot city with everyone trying to figure it out and things like that. So that just gives you a little bit of a taste on the importance of it from a company point of view. We are dabbling in it ourselves from an RTSM point of view in terms of things like, okay, can we, like when we're going through a UAT, for example, if we upload the spec and if we upload the protocol, as well as our UAT test scripts, can we do a comparison and say, hey, what are we missing, from these documents? And we've achieved some level of at least interest to say that, oh, well, did you consider your caps or, the information like that. So we're only beginning to start there, but I do think long term, the challenge with AI is what you're training your data on, right? Because if you don't have clean data, you're going to have hallucinations galore, right? And if you train it on too much, you're still going to end up with hallucinations because the system isn't creative or smart enough to know how to interpret it. So if you say that, okay, here is your playbot, like your sandbox, you're only looking at, I don't know, these like URS documents, here's some guidance around how to interpret and read them. Once you provide it those parameters, I think you're able to build off of that. And that'll create sort of a cascading effect across the different data products that you would create, that will really leverage into something. So that's sort of the hope there for getting cleaner data.
Mhm. And I think it's really important to start small with little steps, um, because we don't know yet how to trust on AI, because also the data pools with Alexion, you have your own data pool, but you're in the lucky situation you can share your data with AstraZeneca. But smaller companies are not in that situation to share their data, so they have only smaller data pools, and I think that's the biggest challenge at the moment. There's a lot of data outside, but how shareable are they? How commonly used are they? And I think that's the limitation at the moment, and that's well, we have also, of course, some things developed in AI. For example, where we ask the CTS people that they don't need to review the report, but they can ask a question like in a chat box, and they get the answer by AI, as an example. But that's only for the data in that study, because also we need to be careful in sharing data. We don't want to share the data from customer A with the data of customer B. That's a confidentiality conflict, and that's where we all see at the moment this is blocking us for really have big data pools. Maybe Brian, you have some other thoughts on that?
I think my thoughts are very different on all this. That doesn't, I don't want that to sound as though I'm saying anyone here is wrong or anything like that. All of our perspectives are certainly valid on this. But the first thing that comes to mind is, we have to remember that artificial intelligence has been here since these past couple of years. Of course, it's been amazing how things have changed. But we also have to remember that AI, the way that we speak about things oftentimes is really the context of generative AI only. And we forget the fact that things like machine learning, computer vision, and these types of things have been around for a long time. As a matter of fact, IVRS is AI, and that was in the 90s. So in a lot of ways, AI is not necessarily new. It's us trying to figure out ways that we can use it.
Yeah.
The framework in order to support AI. Actually, I was writing a white paper on this earlier this morning. And that's the critical part. And I think it goes back to, my years as a teacher when I thought about Maslow and his hierarchy of needs, the idea that, if you don't feel safe, then you won't be able to achieve and find success in life. And I think the same thing is true. If you don't feel safe using AI because you're afraid it's going to take your job, or you're afraid it's going to hallucinate and you're going to get in trouble for it, you're just not going to use it. So we first have to build an
Mm-hmm.
infrastructure within our companies to create safety in AI.
Yep.
And there are so many ways that we can do that to prevent hallucinations. There's so many ways that we can do that to keep our data private. These things are available right now. It's just a matter of us putting together the frameworks in order to feel comfortable leveraging them. And I think, Imran, you mentioned that for sure. You have to upskill. You kind of have to, quote unquote, pass the test. But all of these things are very doable. And the idea about leveraging AI isn't just in generative AI. I think we have to find some ways now where we can start to look at the other parts of AI and take a look at the Gartner hype curve sometime, and you'll see how quickly things are moving as well. So to say that what we're doing in AI today, we all have to train and develop and all that. Well, that's true. But what we're doing today, a month from now, is going to be very old. So there's challenges there as well, trying to keep up with the pace and how quickly things are changing.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Brian. And I think that, when we approach AI at Endpoint, every every opportunity really starts off with almost one slide, right? If you look at the risk profile of any AI POC that eventually becomes a project, right? I mean, there's actually stat out there about 90% of AI projects never make it out of POC. And even when they go live, by the time they're done, there's probably a better form of AI that can actually, implement that much easier, right? But ultimately on this risk curve, you have to look at, okay, right? How ready is your data for AI? What's the opportunity and how risky is it? Is it internal or an external process? And, how are you going to build that into your software in which you'll bring the human into the loop in order
Mhm.
to be able to review the output or the decision-making process before it occurs, right? So, I
Yep.
mean, it's pretty amazing, and it's getting more amazing by the day. And there's a lot of tools out there that help this. You don't have to build everything yourself. I mean, there's, if you look at LangChain, if you look at Sim AI, if you look at all these different LLMs, I mean, there's a tons of ways that there's software out there that just facilitates using AI for you. And, you just have to make sure that you are ready for it, your data is ready for it, and you're using it in a way that is going to be secure and consumable by, individuals. So it's pretty nice. I like it. I know Brian likes
Yep.
it. I know everybody is going to get familiar with it. And I mean, we have to, right? I think that
Mhm.
there's no ifs, ands, or buts. It's just a matter of how and when.
Yep. Absolutely.
So I'm going to remind everyone we're getting into the last 10 minutes. Please post any of your questions. We have one, guys. Where are we with any of the vendors offering AI as part of their systems to help with site inventory management, analysis, and decision making? Which I think this gets into the holy grail of clinical supply management. Are we ready to better predict forecasting?
You need to differentiate what are you forecasting? What is your demand planning? Because you have your demand planning at the very beginning with the manufacturing, the needs that you need for that trial. And once you have a patient enrolled, then the system can easily predict what is needed for that specific patient. Those two differentiators need to be made. And I think from the enrollment point of view, it's the easiest part, although it depends on the granularity of your system and the flexibility of your system. how good you are in having enough medication, as much as needed, as less as possible for that specific patient. But then it comes to also, and that's something we should not forget, how good are the communications, the conversations between ClinOps and CTS? If they don't, if ClinOps doesn't tell to CTS, decide initially expected to enroll, let's say 5 patients next week, but now they have 10 patients lined up, that needs to be adjusted in the IRT supply parameters, and that must be quickly done. So that's something, that's a different part, and that requires enough flexibility and granularity, but also self-service. With respect to the demand planning, then you really need to, from the manufacturing point of view, then you need to be working in another way, because that's something an IRT as such, randomization and supply, cannot do as itself.
So, Jeff, plans for AI at Endpoint?
Yeah, 100%. So, I mean, when we approach our AI roadmap, we have three different verticals, right? We have AI on our data and how you can operationalize that to use AI to provide insights, forecasting information, chat with your data type opportunities. We have AI within the user experience. How do you embed AI in the products to simplify workflows, to help different user processes really with their day to day? And then we have AI when it comes to the business process automation, right? How do you use AI to simplify the actual SDLC, not just from the internal, endpoint standpoint as far as delivering for our customers, but the customers delivering for themselves? How can we help UAT processes, just like Imran mentioned earlier, right? So, we have implemented and we're continuing to implement, different product features and functionalities within those three different verticals. Just really looking how we can simplify this, because I'm sure if everybody on this call and in this attendance group has been in IRT long enough, it can be painful from time to time. And I think everybody's really just looking to make their lives a little bit more manageable, and it's a great opportunity to do so.
And
Yeah,
Imran,
Kat,
as you
real
look at
quickly,
that,
there are a couple out there that are providers that are providing some AI solutions. The pharma companies I consult with, I recommend that they build their own solution that allows them to bring several different things all into under one hood. So really, you're building your own AI solution to accomplish that question of site inventory management, rather than relying on the vendor to keep it all within their system.
yeah, I mean, certainly, what we hear from our customers is they appreciate the AI is internal, and the data stays where the data stays, and the AI comes to the data versus the data goes to AI, which may leak out.
Yeah.
Imran, any kind of things that your organization is looking for when you're looking at vendors these days, and, in terms of the use of AI, is that a good thing, a bad thing, or an extra flag?
Yeah, it's a good thing. And it's sort of at this stage like it's essential. Like if you're not thinking about it, if you're not actively even just trying to figure out how you can leverage AI, then I think as a service provider, you're well, at the rate, to Brian's point earlier and Jeff's about the rate of AI, you're many steps behind the game. So I think it's important, and I think what's encouraging is seeing the creativity around how different vendors are using AI, right? So it doesn't not like a lot of the common ones that we see is, oh, we'll add like a chat bot, to kind of interact with, and I think that's a really good first step. But I think other like providers are also looking at, well, maybe we can leverage AI to streamline like documentation and how we collect that and stuff like that. So if you're making that for improving your internal workflows, all of that has a huge impact to how you interact with your client, right? And as a sponsor, that's crucial for us, right? So if we get better quality documents. We save a lot of time reviewing them, approving of them, things like that. So yes, very, very important.
Awesome. All right. Well, believe it or not, we only have 4 minutes left, guys.
Wow.
So quickly, I'm going to give you each 45 seconds. Final thoughts on where IRT innovation's going. Jeff.
All right, 45 seconds on where IRT innovation's going. So, I don't know how many of the individuals were at the IRT US, but I think Barry Moore did a great, quick 30-minute presentation really on where the industry can go 10 years from now, 20 years from now, and 50 years from now, which heads up, 50 years IRT doesn't exist anymore. But I mean, at the end of the day, I think we talked about a lot of the different tenets of technology on this call. Where we can drive the industry and how we can drive the industry. And I look forward to partnering with everyone to do so.
Awesome. Hank.
I think AI will be the biggest part in RTSM. So a lot will be automated, and the human eye will be there as a check. How integer, how reliable is the answer coming out of AI? That's what we will see in the future. And I believe we don't need to be afraid to lose our job because of AI. We are needed in another way, not in the way today we are working, but we will be needed in another way. There needs to be a specialist that has a gut feeling, enough experience to really say, this answer coming from AI, this suggestion coming from AI, this document coming from AI, yes, I believe this is a good document. This is good.
Run.
Yeah, I will double down on what I was saying at the beginning.
Go ahead, sorry.
So much data that we have in these systems, let us make that data work for us rather than we working for that data. So if we can surface data in a meaningful way, in a way that makes us think less, right, and do more by a result, like that would be great. Whether it's AI or just anything else, machine learning, etc. I think that's what I would like to see.
Brian.
And I've said before, and I'll say it again, AI will not take your job, but someone who knows how to leverage AI might. So just make sure you're all out there doing everything you can to learn and stay up to date. And let's see if we can get these platforms working in the greater eco together. And I think we're on the path toward that for sure.
That's awesome. Well, thank you again to the 4 of you for joining me today. It's really great conversation. I wish I had another hour, but we are within our last 30 seconds. Bill, any wrap-up things you need to tell everyone?
Yeah, thanks again, Kat, and to all our speakers. I'm sure everyone will agree it was a very interesting and informative webinar. And to remind everyone, that, as I said at the beginning of this call, a recording of this event will be sent out to anybody who registered. You'll probably receive it next week. Next, for those of you who aren't aware, BSMA has a clinical technology workstream group that meets approximately every 2 months. So anybody who's interested in joining that group, go on to BSMA's website and feel free to join that group and interact with your peers on topics similar to this, as well as other technology solutions. And last and certainly not least, BSMA is in the early stages of preparing an IRT, however we want to call it, event as part of BSMA's annual conference on March 18th and 19th in Foster City, California. So block your schedules for that, and you'll be hearing more about this event as more information becomes available. So with that said, I'm gonna thank everybody again, and hopefully we can connect soon. Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.